What nobody tells you about bad habits. Ever felt defeated after another failed attempt at building a habit? Check your self-talk. Are you saying I'm trying to be productive or I am a productive person? That tiny difference could explain your struggle. In the next 8 minutes, I'll show you how to rewire your brain for automatic success using identity-based habit formation. Neuroscience proves this approach is 3x more effective than willpower alone. By shifting how you view yourself at a fundamental level, you'll transform how you approach every goal and challenge. This paradigm shift goes beyond traditional productivity advice to change not just what you do, but who you become in the process. The Willpower Trap. Have you ever wondered why you can't stick to your goals even when you're super motivated at the start? You know that feeling. You wake up on January 1st totally pumped to transform your life, but by Valentine's Day, you're right back where you started. Trust me, you're not alone. Most of us have been taught this simple formula. If you want to break a bad habit, you just need enough willpower. It's like we believe willpower is this magical superpower that some people naturally have more of than others. If only I had more self-discipline, we tell ourselves after falling off track for the 10th time. But here's what nobody talks about. Willpower isn't actually a personality trait, it's more like a muscle that gets tired. And this changes everything about how we should approach habit change. Did you know that around 80% of New Year's resolutions crash and burn by February? That's pretty wild when you think about it. All those people start with genuine motivation and real commitment. They aren't failing because they don't care enough. Something else is happening. Think about willpower like your phone battery. You start each morning at 100%, feeling ready to make all the right choices. But every decision you make throughout the day drains a little bit of your willpower battery. Choosing what to wear, deciding what to eat, focusing during boring meetings, being patient with annoying coworkers, each depletes your self-control reserves. By evening, when you're faced with that chocolate cake or that comfy couch instead of your running shoes, your willpower battery is almost empty. You've simply used up your daily supply of self-control. I noticed this pattern in my own life last year. I'd start every Monday committed to my new workout routine. The first couple days, no problem. But by Thursday, when my boss would pile on extra projects and my kids would be fighting over homework, exercising was impossible. My willpower tank was simply empty. Stress is willpower kryptonite. When you're stressed, your body diverts energy away from the parts of your brain responsible for self-control. That's why it's so much harder to stick to your healthy eating plan during a crazy work week or avoid scrolling through social media when you're anxious. Sleep deprivation hits your willpower reserves too. One bad night of sleep makes you more likely to snap at someone or reach for junk food the next day. Research shows that sleep-deprived people experience significant drops in their ability to resist temptations. The daily grind affects you as well. Making decisions at work, resisting break room donuts, forcing productivity when you'd rather watch Netflix. By evening, your willpower has been through a marathon. This creates a frustrating cycle. You start strong with a new habit, maybe meditation, drinking more water, or keeping your desk organized. The first few days go great because your motivation is high and your willpower tank is relatively full. You think, this time it's different, I've finally figured it out. But then, inevitably, life happens. Maybe you catch a cold, have a fight with your partner, or face a deadline at work. Suddenly your willpower reserves are depleted and your new habit is the first thing to go. Just like that, you're back to square one. The worst part? We blame ourselves. We think it's a personal failing or character flaw. Why can't I just stick with anything? What's wrong with me? This self-criticism creates a negative emotional spiral that makes habit change even harder the next time. I remember feeling this way after my 4th attempt at becoming a morning person. When I failed again, I didn't just feel disappointed, I felt like a failure. Like, maybe I wasn't cut out for being one of those productive, disciplined people I admired. But what if the problem isn't you at all? What if the entire approach of relying on willpower is fundamentally flawed? This is where things get interesting. There's a completely different approach that successful habit changers use, one that doesn't depend on having unlimited willpower or superhuman discipline. People who maintain good habits long-term aren't constantly fighting temptation. They've discovered something else. Think about someone you know who seems to effortlessly maintain good habits. Maybe they're always punctual, or they never miss a workout, or their home is consistently tidy. If you ask them how much willpower it takes, they'd probably look at you confused. For them, these behaviors don't require much willpower at all. It's just what they do. So what's their secret? How have they escaped the willpower trap that ensnares the rest of us? The truth is that willpower was never meant to be our primary strategy for long-term habit change. It's a limited resource that will eventually run out, no matter how motivated you are or how important your goals are. Relying on willpower alone is like trying to drive across the country on a single tank of gas. It's simply not designed for that purpose. This explains why most people fail at breaking bad habits, even when highly motivated. It's not because they don't want it badly enough or aren't trying hard enough. It's because they're using a tool designed for short-term challenges, not for permanent lifestyle changes. So if willpower isn't the answer, what is? The alternative approach has to do with something much deeper than motivation or discipline, something that shapes your automatic behaviors without requiring constant effort, something that successful habit changers have discovered, often by accident, a powerful identity-based system that we'll explore next. Your brain on habits. You know how your phone automatically connects to your home Wi-Fi without you having to think about it? Your brain does something similar with habits. What if I told you that 40 to 45% of what you do every day isn't actually decided by you, but by automatic neural pathways that formed long ago? Understanding this brain mechanism changes everything about breaking bad habits. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain when you reach for that phone first thing in the morning or grab a snack when you're bored. Your brain has this amazing feature, not a bug, that puts your regular behaviors on autopilot. Think about it. You don't have to consciously remember how to brush your teeth or drive to work. Your brain figured out how to make these things automatic so you could save your mental energy for more important stuff. This autopilot system lives in a part of your brain called the basal ganglia. It's like your brain's personal assistant that handles all your routine tasks so you don't have to think about them. When you do something repeatedly, this little assistant takes notes and creates a shortcut for next time. Consider your morning routine. You probably follow the same sequence every day without thinking. Maybe you brush your teeth, then shower, make coffee, and check your phone. This entire sequence becomes automated through these neural shortcuts. Every time you repeat a behavior, whether it's scrolling social media when you should be working or grabbing chips instead of an apple, your brain physically changes. It creates neural pathways, connecting the cue, feeling bored, to the routine, checking Instagram, to the reward, that dopamine hit from seeing new content. These neural highways become more established with repetition. It works like a path through a forest. The first time someone walks through dense woods, they barely leave a trace. But after many people have walked that same route, there's a clear, well-defined path that's easy to follow. Your habits are those well-worn paths. They've become the path of least resistance in your brain. This is where dopamine enters the picture. Dopamine is about anticipation and motivation rather than pleasure itself. It's your brain saying, "Remember last time we did this? That was good. Let's do it again." Dopamine doesn't just spike when you get the reward. It fires when you encounter the cue. See a notification on your phone? Dopamine. Smell fresh cookies? Dopamine. Feel a little stressed? Dopamine, telling you that checking social media or eating something sweet will make you feel better. Your brain predicts the reward before you even get it. This prediction system makes habits difficult to break. Your brain constantly scans for cues that predict rewards, and when it finds one, it creates an urge to act. That urge is a physical response in your brain chemistry pushing you toward the behavior. Now, remember how we talked about willpower earlier? There's essentially a tug-of-war happening in your brain between two major players. In one corner, we have your prefrontal cortex, your willpower center, responsible for decision-making and impulse control. In the other corner is your basal ganglia, your habit center, running those automatic programs. Under normal conditions, your prefrontal cortex can override automatic habits when needed. It's like having a manual override button. But here's the problem. Your prefrontal cortex is sensitive to stress, exhaustion, and mental load. When you're stressed, your brain releases cortisol, which severely weakens your prefrontal cortex. It shuts down the command center that would normally help you make good decisions. Think about the last time you had a stressful day at work. Maybe you came home planning to go for a run or cook a healthy dinner, but instead found yourself on the couch with takeout and Netflix. That's not because you're weak or don't care about your goals. It's because stress hormones physically changed how your brain was functioning in that moment. When your prefrontal cortex goes offline, your habit pathways continue running at full power. They require minimal energy or conscious thought, so they keep functioning even when the rest of your brain is exhausted. This explains why even highly motivated people fall back into old patterns during stressful times. Their brain defaults to the path of least resistance. By the time you become consciously aware that you're reaching for cookies or opening Instagram, the habit circuit is already activated. Your conscious mind often simply justifies what your automatic brain has already decided to do. But this isn't all doom and gloom. Understanding how your brain forms and maintains habits gives us tremendous power to change them. Just as your brain created those neural pathways, it can create new ones. If you stop walking the old route and consistently take a new one, eventually the old path gets overgrown while the new one becomes established. The key insight is that fighting against your brain's natural habit-forming tendency is an uphill battle. It's smarter to work with your brain's design rather than against it. Instead of trying to demolish the old highway, we can build a new, more appealing route and redirect the traffic. This neurological understanding gives us a completely different approach to breaking bad habits. Rather than relying on willpower, we can focus on rewiring the automatic systems themselves. And as we'll see next, these neural pathways are intimately connected to how you see yourself. Your habits aren't just what you do, they're woven into the very fabric of who you believe you are. The identity factor. That neural pathway explanation makes total sense, right? But here's the thing, there's something even more fundamental going on. Your brain isn't just running automatic programs, it's constantly asking itself, what would someone like me do in this situation? The answer to that question drives your behavior more powerfully than any habit loop or neural pathway. So what is this mysterious force I'm talking about? It's your identity, your self-image, the story you tell yourself about who you are. And it's arguably the most powerful hidden driver behind every habit you have. Think about it for a second. Have you ever heard someone say, or maybe you've said it yourself, I'm trying to quit smoking, but it's really hard? That statement seems innocent enough, but there's a massive problem with it. When you say you're trying to quit, you're still identifying as a smoker who's struggling, not as a non-smoker. Your brain hears that and thinks, right, because smoking is what people like me do. This identity concept is deeply rooted in our psychology. We humans have this profound need for consistency between our actions and who we believe we are. Psychologists call this cognitive consistency, and it's basically your brain's desire to have your behaviors match your beliefs about yourself. When you do something that doesn't align with your self-image, you feel this uncomfortable mental tension. It's like wearing a mask that doesn't fit your face. It chafes, it's uncomfortable, and you're constantly aware of its presence. Psychologists call this feeling cognitive dissonance. Your brain hates this tension and will do almost anything to resolve it. I experienced this myself when I first started creating content. I'd always thought of myself as someone who works behind the scenes, not a person who puts themselves out there. Each time I recorded, I felt this intense discomfort, like I was betraying my true self. My brain kept sending signals, this isn't you. It wasn't until I began shifting how I saw myself that the discomfort started to fade. When faced with cognitive dissonance, your brain has two options. Change the behavior to match your identity, or change how you view yourself. And typically, the behavior gets adjusted to match your existing identity, not the other way around. Consider someone who thinks of themselves as not a morning person. They might try waking up at 5 a.m. to exercise for a few days, but soon enough that alarm goes off and a little voice says, "Who am I kidding? I'm not a morning person." And back to sleep they go. Their actions realign with their identity. This pattern appears everywhere once you start looking. I've got no willpower around chocolate. I'm terrible with money. I always procrastinate on big projects. These aren't just observations about behavior. They're identity statements that program future actions. The concerning part? We make choices that align with these identities even when they hurt us. Someone who believes I'm just not good with technology will avoid learning new digital skills, even if it costs them a promotion. Someone who thinks I have a sweet tooth will keep eating desserts, even while battling health issues. This is why behaviors that conflict with your identity create so much internal resistance. It's like paddling upstream against a powerful current. You might make progress for a while through sheer effort, but eventually the current wins. Consider someone wanting to become more productive, but who views themselves as a person who works best under pressure. Every time they try to implement a productivity system, part of them thinks, this isn't really me. So even if they follow the system briefly, their brain constantly looks for evidence that it doesn't work for someone like them. This is exactly why traditional habit change advice often fails. When you change what you do without changing who you believe you are, you're fighting against your own identity. It's like planting new seeds while simultaneously spraying weed killer on the soil. Statements like "I'm trying to eat healthier" seem positive, but they're actually reinforcing an identity of someone who struggles with healthy eating. And your brain, seeking consistency, will make sure your actions match that struggling identity. But here's where the real magic happens. What if, instead of forcing new behaviors that conflict with your current identity, you focused on shifting your identity first? What if you changed "I'm trying to quit smoking" to "I'm not a smoker," or "I'm trying to eat healthier" to "I'm someone who nourishes my body"? When you make this identity shift, something remarkable happens. Actions that once required tremendous willpower start to feel more natural because they align with who you believe you are. When you pass on that cigarette or choose a healthy meal, you're not fighting against yourself. You're simply acting in accordance with your identity. This explains why some people maintain good habits without much struggle. It's not superhuman willpower. The behaviors are congruent with how they see themselves. A person who identifies as an athlete doesn't need willpower to exercise. They're just being who they are. So why do "I'm trying to quit" statements practically guarantee failure? They reinforce an identity of someone who struggles with change, creating an internal conflict that your brain resolves by returning to the old behavior. The breakthrough comes when you realize that you can choose your identity. You're not stuck with "I'm a procrastinator" or "I'm not a morning person." These aren't unchangeable facts about you. They're stories you've been telling yourself, often for so long that you've forgotten they're just stories. The identity-based approach. These stories we tell ourselves might seem fixed. But what if I told you there's a proven approach that's 3 times more effective than willpower-based methods? The secret lies in a simple mental shift that successful habit changers use instinctively, but most people never discover. It's not about fighting against your natural tendencies. It's about redefining who you fundamentally are. The identity-based approach versus traditional willpower. Think about the people you know who maintain healthy habits without struggle. Maybe your friend who never misses a morning workout, or your colleague who naturally stays organized. When you ask them how they do it, they often shrug and say, "That's just who I am." This casual comment is actually the key to their success. The identity-based approach flips the traditional model on its head. Traditional approach. Start with the behavior you want to change. Identity approach. Start with the identity you want to embody. When someone says, "I'm trying to eat better," they create an immediate psychological hurdle. The statement implies they're not naturally someone who eats well, but they're forcing themselves to do it anyway. Compare that to someone who says, "I'm someone who nourishes my body." This identity-based statement creates a completely different psychological framework. They're simply acting in alignment with who they believe themselves to be. When choosing what to eat, the decision flows naturally from their identity rather than requiring willpower. The psychological advantage. The psychological difference is massive. Willpower approach. Each healthy choice feels like a sacrifice won through discipline. Identity approach. Each choice feels like an affirmation of who you already are. When you adopt an identity-based approach, you create what psychologists call internal consistency. Your brain loves consistency between your beliefs and actions. When you define yourself as someone who prioritizes sleep, going to bed at a reasonable hour becomes a natural expression of your identity. Your brain feels satisfied when your actions match your self-image. Research-backed evidence. A compelling study examined two groups trying to quit smoking. The first group was taught to say, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit," when offered a cigarette. The second group was instructed to say, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." The results were remarkable. The identity-based group was significantly more likely to remain smoke-free months later. Why? The first statement keeps the person's identity as a smoker intact. They're just temporarily behaving differently. The second statement establishes a new identity that makes refusing cigarettes feel natural. The University of California found that participants who framed their goals in terms of identity, to be a helpful person, versus behavior, to do this helpful thing, were more likely to persist through setbacks. These participants viewed each action as part of a larger story about themselves, not just isolated behaviors. Most impressively, the National Institutes of Health published research showing that people making identity-based statements before facing temptations were approximately 3 times more successful at maintaining desired behaviors compared to those relying on willpower alone. The effect was so dramatic that researchers concluded identity change should be central to any habit transformation program. The compounding effect. Identity shifts create a compounding effect. Small actions aligned with your new identity serve as evidence that reinforces your belief in that identity. Each time you make a choice aligned with being someone who exercises regularly, you strengthen that self-image, making the next similar choice easier. This approach also changes our emotional experience of habit change. When you're trying to change a behavior, each day feels like a battle. But with an identity shift, you experience what psychologists call identity-congruent behavior. Actions that feel natural because they match who you believe yourself to be. How to make the shift. This isn't about positive thinking or empty declarations. Your identity shift needs to be paired with evidence, but the evidence doesn't need to be massive. Small, consistent actions that align with your new identity are enough to start the shift. Consider someone transitioning from "I'm trying to write more" to "I'm a writer." The identity-based approach might start with writing just 50 words a day. Each small writing session becomes evidence that reinforces the identity of being a writer. Over time, the identity solidifies, and writing becomes more natural. This approach addresses what scientists call the intention-behavior gap, the space between what we intend to do and what we actually do. Traditional approaches focus on strengthening intention through motivation. Identity-based habit change closes the gap by making the desired behavior feel like the natural expression of who you are. The compelling aspect of this approach is that it doesn't require extraordinary discipline. It works precisely because it reduces the need for those limited resources. When a behavior aligns with your identity, it requires less mental energy to perform. This is why people who identify as runners don't need to constantly motivate themselves to run. It's simply what they do. Your identity isn't fixed. It's malleable and responds to how you think about yourself and the small actions you take. Even if you've spent years thinking of yourself as someone with no willpower, you can begin changing that story today. What makes identity-based habit change particularly powerful is that it creates what psychologists call upstream interventions. Instead of constantly fighting the same battles downstream, resisting temptation, forcing yourself, you're changing the source of the river. By shifting your identity, you naturally alter the
Changing
flow
the source
of your
of the
choices
river is
and
powerful.
behaviors. But how exactly do you do that in real life? Instead of vaguely telling yourself to be better, there's a specific 4-step framework that successful identity shifters use to make their transformation stick. And unlike most habit strategies, it doesn't start with what you do. It starts with who you are. Let me walk you through this process that works like planting a seed that eventually blooms into natural behaviors. Changing how you see yourself might sound complicated, but it's actually simpler than the endless cycle of forcing yourself to do things that feel unnatural day after day. The 4 steps are: define who you want to become, audit your current self-talk, create new identity statements, and act on your new identity with small, consistent actions. Here's how each step works. Step 1. Define the type of person you want to become. Focus on identity rather than outcomes. Ask what kind of person naturally achieves your desired results. Identify the values and characteristics this person embodies. Consider their typical behaviors and mindset. For example, instead of focusing on the goal of working out 3 times a week, you'd think about becoming someone who prioritizes physical strength and energy. Or rather than trying to stop procrastinating, you'd define yourself as someone who takes immediate action on important tasks. This shifts the focus to your ideal self rather than just listing behaviors you should force yourself to do. Step 2. Audit your current self-talk and identify limiting identity statements. Create a note on your phone to track negative self-definitions. Record phrases like, "I'm just not a morning person," or "I can never stick to anything." Identify where these beliefs originated: teachers, parents, peers. Recognize how these statements reinforce behaviors you want to change. What's particularly eye-opening about this audit is discovering how many of these statements we've inherited from others. Maybe a teacher once told you that you weren't good with numbers, or a parent repeatedly mentioned how stubborn you were as a child. These external labels often become internalized identities that dictate our habits decades later. Step 3. Create new identity statements using the "I am someone who" format. Phrase statements positively, focusing on what you are, not what you're not. Make statements specific to the identity you want to embody. Avoid mentioning negative behaviors you're trying to overcome. Connect statements to values that matter to you. For the procrastinator, a new identity statement might be, "I am someone who takes immediate action when something matters." For the person who struggles with healthy eating, it might be, "I am someone who nourishes my body with foods that give me energy." These statements create a new mental template for your brain to follow. Research from self-perception theory shows that when we make declarative statements about ourselves, our brains actively look for ways to maintain consistency with those statements. Once you start telling yourself, "I am someone who," your brain gets to work finding ways to make that statement true. Step 4. Take small actions that prove your new identity to yourself. Focus on consistency rather than magnitude. View each action as a vote for your new identity. Start with tiny behaviors you can do daily. Build a chain of evidence that reinforces who you're becoming. These actions don't need to be massive changes. For someone shifting to a person who maintains a clean environment, making their bed each morning might be a small vote. For someone becoming a person who prioritizes learning, reading just 1 page of a book before bed could be their daily vote. James Clear calls this process identity-based habits, and explains that every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. What makes this approach powerful is that you're not relying on motivation or willpower. You're acting in alignment with who you believe yourself to be. Each time you act according to your new identity, you strengthen your belief in that identity, making it easier to take the next action. This creates a positive feedback loop that gains momentum over time. When implementing this process, avoid these common pitfalls. Trying to tackle too many identity shifts simultaneously. Giving up before neural pathways have time to rewire. Abandoning the process after temporary setbacks. It's more effective to focus on one core identity shift that might naturally lead to improvements in multiple areas. For instance, becoming someone who honors commitments to themselves can positively impact everything from fitness to finances to relationships. What's especially effective about this approach is how it handles setbacks. With traditional habit change methods, a slip-up often leads to complete abandonment. But with identity-based habit change, temporary setbacks don't threaten your new identity. You simply think, that behavior wasn't aligned with who I am, but that doesn't change who I am. Many of my clients are surprised by how quickly this shift starts to feel natural. One person told me that after just 2 weeks of practicing her new identity as someone who speaks up in meetings, she found herself contributing ideas without even thinking about it. The conscious identity statement had begun to operate at an unconscious level. Real-world identity transformations. That transformation from conscious effort to automatic behavior isn't just happening in boardrooms. I've had the chance to follow 3 completely different people who've used identity-based habit change to transform areas where they'd been stuck for years. And the best part? None of them are extraordinary. They're regular people who discovered that changing who they are works better than forcing what they do. Meet Sarah, who struggled with her weight for nearly a decade. She tried everything: keto, intermittent fasting, meal delivery services, even signing up for a gym membership she rarely used. I was always on a diet or cheating on my diet, she told me. There was no in-between. The turning point came after her doctor warned her about her rising blood pressure. Rather than jumping into another restrictive eating plan, Sarah decided to try something different. Instead of saying, "I'm trying to lose weight," Sarah began telling herself, "I am someone who nourishes my body." This subtle shift changed everything. She started asking herself what a person who nourishes their body would eat for breakfast. Suddenly, her morning donut didn't align with who she was becoming. Sarah didn't immediately overhaul her entire diet. She started with just breakfast, choosing foods that aligned with her new identity. I'd ask myself, would someone who nourishes their body eat this? Sometimes the answer was yes, even for foods I previously labeled as bad, she explained. Her identity focused on intention and care rather than restriction. Within 3 weeks, Sarah noticed she was naturally reaching for different snacks without willpower battles. 6 months later, she'd lost 27 pounds without feeling like she was dieting. The weight loss was actually secondary, she said. The primary change was that I stopped fighting with myself about food. The voice in my head changed. Then there's Marcus, who described himself as chronically disorganized for most of his adult life. His desk was perpetually buried under papers, his computer desktop a chaotic mess of files, and his calendar a suggestion rather than a commitment. The constant disorder left him feeling anxious and overwhelmed. I bought every productivity book and app out there, he said. I'd get organized for maybe a week before sliding back into chaos. Marcus would beat himself up for being lazy, reinforcing his identity as someone who just couldn't get it together. The shift began when he adopted the identity statement. I am someone who creates clarity for myself and others. Marcus took immediate small actions to reinforce this new identity. He started each day by clearing his desk before opening his computer, a simple ritual that someone who creates clarity would do. It took literally 2 minutes, he said, but it was a physical vote for my new identity. The ripple effects spread quickly. After 2 weeks, Marcus found himself naturally organizing his digital files at the end of each workday without reminders. Within a month, his colleagues were commenting on his improved organization. I'm just doing simple things consistently because that's who I am now. Similarly transformative was Jasmine's journey from financial chaos to stability. She described herself as a financial disaster who was always broke before payday despite earning a good salary. The shame of hiding her financial struggles while maintaining an image of success was exhausting. I was the queen of justifying purchases, she admitted. I deserved that vacation because I worked hard. After accumulating $23,000 in credit card debt, Jasmine tried numerous budgeting systems, but nothing stuck because, as she put it, I still saw myself fundamentally as a spender, not a saver. Everything changed when Jasmine shifted to the identity. I am someone who builds wealth. This felt empowering rather than restrictive. Building wealth felt like something positive I was doing, not something I was depriving myself of, she explained. Jasmine's first action was setting up an automatic transfer of just $50 per payday into an investment account. It was about taking an action that a wealth builder would take. Before purchases, she'd pause and ask if this aligned with her wealth-building identity. The most significant change was how her relationship with money transformed. 6 months later, she found herself researching investment strategies and negotiating better terms on her bills, behaviors that emerged naturally from her new identity. 18 months later, Jasmine had paid off $15,000 of debt and built her first emergency fund. What connects these transformations is the alignment between identity and action. Each person changed the source of the river, their self-image, and their actions naturally flowed in a new direction. When I checked in years later, their changes had lasted. Sarah's new eating patterns continued for over 2 years. She explained, "There are days when I eat things that aren't particularly nourishing, but they don't trigger a spiral of guilt because I'm still fundamentally someone who nourishes my body." Marcus received a promotion partly because of his reputation for bringing clarity to complex projects. "My desk gets messy sometimes, but I no longer see that as evidence that I'm a disorganized person. It's just a temporary state that doesn't match who I really am." Jasmine, now debt-free, helps friends develop their own wealth-building identities. "I now feel uncomfortable when I'm not conscious about my money. That's when I realized the identity had fully taken hold, when the old behavior felt foreign." What's striking in each case is how the initial actions were tiny. These small actions were evidence-building opportunities, each one a vote for their new identity. And once that identity was established, behaviors that once required tremendous effort became the path of least resistance. The power question. While those tiny actions build momentum over time, we all encounter those make-or-break moments when our old habits scream for attention. What if I told you there's a single question that could instantly reveal what you should do? Not by forcing yourself, but by tapping into who you're becoming. Think about the last time you faced a moment of temptation. Maybe it was that notification pulling you away from deep work, or that extra cookie calling your name when you were trying to make healthier choices. In those moments, what happened in your mind? For most of us, it becomes this exhausting internal battle. One part of you knows what you should do, while another part desperately wants to give in. This mental tug-of-war is incredibly draining. You start negotiating with yourself. "I'll just check Instagram for 5 minutes and then get back to work." Or "I've been good all week, so one cookie won't hurt." Sound familiar? The problem isn't that you lack discipline, it's that you're using the wrong decision-making framework entirely. Here's the power question that cuts through the noise. In any moment of temptation or decision, pause. Take a breath. Then ask yourself, what would someone who your desired identity do right now? The psychological shift this creates is profound. Instead of making decisions based on willpower reserves, you're making them based on identity, who you're becoming. Let me show you how this works. Imagine you're at your desk, deep in an important project. Your phone buzzes. Instagram, your friend posted something new. The familiar tug of distraction pulls at you. Old habits whisper, "Just a quick look." But instead of debating whether you have the willpower to resist, you ask, what would someone who's a focused achiever do right now? The answer crystallizes immediately. A focused achiever would keep their phone on Do Not Disturb until completing their task. Or maybe you're working on healthier eating. When faced with ordering lunch, instead of calculating calories or fighting cravings, ask, what would someone who nourishes their body do right now? This bypasses the willpower question completely and connects you directly to your identity. The beauty of this question is how it creates immediate clarity. It's about recognizing that certain choices simply don't align with who you're becoming. The internal conflict dissolves because you're not fighting against yourself anymore. You're being consistent with your identity. I've seen this work across many situations. A client transforming her financial habits would ask, what would someone who builds wealth do right now when faced with impulse purchases? Another working on being more present with his family would ask, what would someone who prioritizes meaningful connections do when tempted to check work emails at dinner? This works because our brains are wired for consistency. When we frame decisions in terms of our identity, we tap into something much more powerful than willpower, our fundamental need to act in ways that align with how we see ourselves. Every time you act in alignment with your new identity, you strengthen it. Each decision becomes both evidence of who you are and reinforcement of who you're becoming. Those small aligned choices compound over time until the new identity feels completely natural. Timing is crucial. Ask this question during the decision point, that brief window between stimulus and response. You feel the urge to procrastinate, reach for your phone, or grab that unhealthy snack. That's when you pause and ask the power question. The pause creates just enough space to shift from reactive to intentional. The language matters too. I phrase it as, what would someone who identity do, rather than what should someone like me do? This subtle difference focuses on the person you're becoming, not who you've been. It's forward-looking without feeling forced. At first, this question might feel awkward. You might feel like you're pretending. That's normal. You're in transition between your old identity and your new one. The gap can feel uncomfortable, but every time you ask this question and act accordingly, you're building a bridge across that gap. Have this question ready in advance for specific challenging situations. If mornings are when you struggle with exercise, prepare the question, what would someone who prioritizes physical well-being do right now, before that alarm goes off? Preparation eliminates hesitation, giving old habits less room to take over. This approach works for any area of your life where you want change: health, productivity, relationships, creativity, finances, because it operates on the fundamental mechanics of identity. As your new identity strengthens, you'll need the power question less frequently. Decisions that once required conscious intervention start happening automatically. That's when your new identity has truly taken root. I remember someone who transformed from chronic procrastinator to efficient finisher telling me, "I used to need constant reminders to start tasks right away. Now I feel uncomfortable when I don't. The thing that took so much effort now feels like the path of least resistance." That's the goal of identity-based habit change, making the right choices feel like the easiest choices, not because you've strengthened willpower, but because you've changed who you are fundamentally. The power question also acts as a reality check. If you consistently ignore the answer to what would someone who identity do, it might signal you haven't fully bought into that identity yet. Perhaps choose a different identity that resonates more deeply, or build more evidence through small actions first. Overcoming identity conflicts. That feeling when you know exactly what your new identity would do, but something inside still pulls you toward your old habits? It's a legitimate identity conflict. These competing self-images make change difficult and create a sense that you're betraying a part of yourself. When you look deeper at those moments where you feel torn between two choices, you're actually experiencing two different versions of yourself fighting for control. Think about the last time you felt completely split about a decision. Maybe you were staring at your phone late at night, knowing you should sleep, but also feeling that urge to keep scrolling. That internal tug-of-war resembles two teams pulling a rope in opposite directions. One team represents your rest-valuing self, the other your entertainment-seeking self, both legitimate parts of who you are. What's fascinating is that we don't usually have just one identity. We have several that can activate in different situations. Psychology professor Dr. Jennifer Goldman explains that most people maintain multiple self-concepts that can be in direct opposition to each other. These aren't necessarily false selves, but rather different facets of who we are that may have conflicting values or priorities. This helps explain why change can feel so confusing sometimes. You're negotiating between different versions of yourself. Some of the most common identity conflicts show up around health. You might simultaneously identify as someone who cares about fitness and nutrition, while also seeing yourself as someone who deserves comfort and indulgence. The health-conscious identity might dominate during your morning workout, but the comfort seeker takes over after a stressful day when pizza beckons. Similar conflicts arise with money and productivity. Many identify both as careful financial planners and spontaneous enjoyers of life. Others see themselves as ambitious achievers, while simultaneously valuing downtime and relaxation. These competing identities create moments where you feel frozen between options, like a compass needle caught between two powerful magnets. What makes these conflicts uncomfortable is that resolving them isn't as simple as picking one identity over the other. Your brain recognizes both identities as valid parts of who you are, and completely abandoning either one feels like self-betrayal. Behavioral psychologist Dr. Maya Peterson notes, when people experience identity conflicts, their brains are essentially running two operating systems simultaneously. This creates cognitive dissonance that drains mental energy and makes consistent action nearly impossible. This explains the mental exhaustion you feel when trying to change habits tied to strong aspects of your identity. Consider Mark, a finance professional who struggled for years between his disciplined saver and experience seeker identities. "I'd save rigorously for months, then blow my budget on impulse purchases or trips," he explains. "Afterward, I'd feel guilty and overcorrect by becoming extremely frugal. The cycle was exhausting." So what's the solution? Instead of trying to eliminate one identity, the key is integration. Start by acknowledging both sides of your identity conflict without judgment. If you identify both as health-conscious and comfort-seeking, recognize that both serve important functions in your life. Once you've acknowledged both identities, look for the deeper values behind each one. The health identity might be rooted in values of vitality and self-respect, while the comfort identity might represent values of pleasure and emotional regulation. When you see them this way, they're not actually opposed, they're just different expressions of caring for yourself. The next step is creating a new integrated identity statement that honors both sides. Instead of, "I'm a disciplined healthy eater" versus "I'm someone who enjoys comfort food," you might reframe to, "I'm someone who nourishes my body and enjoys food mindfully." This new identity allows for both nutritious choices and occasional indulgences without internal conflict. For productivity conflicts, you might shift from "I'm a hard worker" versus "I need lots of downtime" to "I'm someone who creates focused value and prioritizes quality renewal." This integrated identity respects both your ambition and your need for rest. Neuroscientist Dr. Alex Korb explains why this integration works. When you create a new overarching identity that encompasses seemingly contradictory values, you're actually building new neural connections between previously separate networks in the brain. This integration reduces the activation of the brain's conflict monitoring system, making decisions feel less fraught. The process of integration also involves redefining what certain behaviors mean to you. For instance, a rest day becomes strategic recovery that serves your productivity identity. Similarly, saving money becomes creating future opportunities for even better experiences. For Mark, integration came through creating a clear financial framework. "I now allocate specific percentages to savings and experiences. My adventure fund lets me enjoy life without guilt, while my savings grow steadily. It's like both parts of me finally stopped fighting and started collaborating." You can identify which identity conflicts are holding you back by paying attention to those moments when you feel most torn about your choices. Notice the language you use internally. Phrases like "I should" versus "I want to" often signal identity conflicts. Integration doesn't happen overnight. When you feel torn between two options, try saying "I'm someone who" and finishing with your integrated identity statement. This reminds your brain of the bigger picture and reduces the feeling of having to choose between competing parts of yourself. Environmental design can also support identity integration. Create spaces and routines that honor both sides of your identity conflicts. This physical separation helps your brain understand that both identities have their place. What's extraordinary about resolving identity conflicts is how it transforms the experience of habit change. When your identities are aligned rather than competing, making good choices actually feels easier. The internal resistance dissolves because you're no longer betraying any part of yourself. The timeline of transformation. You're expressing a more complete version of who you are. The myth of 21 days to form a habit has probably popped up in your social media feed more times than you can count. But here's what's actually happening. That number came from a plastic surgeon who noticed his patients took about 21 days to adjust to their new appearance, not form a completely new habit. When it comes to identity transformation, we're talking about something much deeper than just building a single habit. Research consistently shows that the real timeline for habit formation ranges anywhere from 18 to 254 days, with an average of 66 days before a new behavior becomes automatic. Identity shifts operate on an entirely different schedule. The timeline for becoming someone new isn't measured in days, it's measured in evidence. Identity transformations follow what James Clear calls the plateau of latent potential. This is when change is happening beneath the surface, even though you can't see visible results yet. It's like planting a seed. Nothing seems to happen for weeks, but crucial root development is occurring underground. The roots are establishing themselves, creating a foundation strong enough to support what will eventually break through the soil. Your new identity takes root in this same invisible way, establishing connections in your mind before manifesting in visible behaviors. The process typically follows a predictable pattern. First comes the awkward beginning. When you feel like an imposter trying on this new identity, you might say, "I am a runner," but still feel weird putting on running shoes. This phase is uncomfortable, and it's where most people quit. They interpret the discomfort as evidence that they're not really changing, when actually, it's proof the process is working. Next comes the growing evidence phase. You start collecting small votes for your new identity through consistent actions. Each time you go for a run, even a short one, you're casting a vote for being a runner. These votes accumulate silently, building momentum without dramatic visible change. During this phase, you might still feel conflicted, but you're starting to have moments where the new identity feels natural. Then comes the tipping point, usually around the 2 to 3 month mark of consistent small actions. Something clicks, and suddenly your new identity statement feels true. You're not pretending anymore. When someone asks if you're a runner, you don't hesitate. You simply say yes. This is when your behaviors start flowing naturally from your identity rather than requiring constant effort. The final phase is integration, where your new identity becomes so embedded that you barely think about it. The actions that once required deliberate effort now feel strange not to do. Missing a run actually feels uncomfortable because it conflicts with who you now know yourself to be. Remember, these phases progress at different rates for everyone. Some people might hit their tipping point after just a month, while others might need 6 months before their new identity feels natural. The timeline depends on how entrenched your previous identity was, how consistently you're taking identity-aligned actions, and whether you have supportive people around you. University of London researcher Philippa Lally found that missing a single opportunity to perform the new behavior didn't significantly impact habit formation. This applies to identity shifts too. Perfection isn't required. Consistency matters more than flawless execution. Those inevitable slip-ups don't reset your progress to zero. Progress happens in bursts after periods of apparent stagnation. You might feel stuck for weeks, then suddenly experience a quantum leap in how natural your new identity feels. This is completely normal and expected. The seed beneath the soil isn't procrastinating, it's preparing. The apparent lack of progress is often when the most important work is happening. Patience becomes essential during these plateaus. Most people abandon their identity shift right before hitting the tipping point. They interpret the plateau as failure, rather than recognizing it as the necessary incubation period. What separates successful identity transformers isn't willpower or talent. It's the willingness to keep going when results aren't yet visible. How do you know if your identity is shifting even when it doesn't feel like it? Look for these subtle signs. You start noticing opportunities to express your new identity that you wouldn't have seen before. Your language shifts naturally from "I'm trying to eat better" to "I don't really eat that kind of food." You make decisions based on your new identity without having to consciously invoke it. And perhaps most telling, others start to recognize and reinforce your new identity through their comments. The beauty of identity-based transformation is that it creates a compounding effect. Each small action reinforces your self-image and makes the next aligned action easier. While the initial phase requires conscious effort, The later phases actually save you mental energy because you're no longer fighting with yourself about these decisions. Studies from the European Journal of Social Psychology show that habit formation speeds up when the new behavior aligns with how we see ourselves. As your identity shift strengthens, your timeline for adopting new habits within that identity actually shortens. The practical takeaway is to commit to a minimum of 3 months of consistent small actions that reinforce your new identity. This time frame gives the transformation process enough runway to work through the initial awkward phase and accumulate sufficient evidence to reach the tipping point for most people. What can you do right now? First, recognize that feeling like an imposter initially is completely normal. Second, create a simple tracking system to record your identity-aligned actions, making progress visible when motivation wanes. Third, find someone who will reinforce your new identity by treating you as if you've already become that person. Most importantly, release the expectation of overnight transformation. Identity shifts follow a non-linear timeline with predictable phases. Periods of apparent stagnation are essential parts of the process, not signs of failure. Like the seed beneath the soil, your transformation is happening even when you can't see it yet. Your productivity transformation. Accepting those periods of stagnation is crucial. But what if I told you your productivity struggles aren't actually about time management at all? The real reason you keep falling back into procrastination patterns has nothing to do with your to-do list system or how early you wake up. It's about who you believe yourself to be at your core. Let's talk about productivity specifically, because I know that's probably why you're here. You've tried everything, right? The Pomodoro technique, time blocking, to-do lists, productivity apps, accountability partners, maybe even a wellness retreat if you were feeling fancy. And yet, somehow, you still find yourself scrolling through social media when you should be working on that important project. Here's the truth. Productivity isn't about tactics. It's about identity. The most efficient people don't try to be productive. They simply see themselves as productive people, and their actions naturally flow from that core belief. Think about your current productivity identity for a second. When you sit down to work, what story are you telling yourself? If it's something like, I'm easily distracted, or I always procrastinate until the last minute, guess what your brain is going to help you do? That's right. Get distracted and procrastinate. Your brain is trying to keep your actions consistent with who you believe yourself to be. So let's transform that productivity identity using what we've learned. Instead of I'm trying to be more focused, shift to I am someone who creates value through focused work. Instead of I'm trying to stop procrastinating, try I am someone who takes immediate action on priorities. For anyone struggling with chronic disorganization, you might adopt I am someone who creates systems that bring clarity. These statements describe who you are at your core. Now let's apply our 4-step process specifically to productivity transformation. Step 1. Define exactly what type of productive person you want to become. Are you someone who completes projects ahead of deadline? Someone who brings creative solutions to complex problems? Someone who accomplishes more in 4 focused hours than others do in 8 scattered ones? Step 2. Audit your current productivity identity statements. Pay attention to those automatic thoughts when you sit down to work. You might notice thoughts like this is going to take forever, or I always get distracted around the 20-minute mark. These limiting beliefs are programming your actions without you realizing it. Step 3. Create your new productivity identity statements. Here are powerful ones to try. I am someone who enters deep focus effortlessly. I am someone who consistently delivers exceptional work. I am someone who makes decisions quickly and confidently. Find the statement that resonates with you most, the one that makes you feel excited when you say it. Step 4. Take small actions that prove your new identity to yourself. These don't need to be massive productivity overhauls. The smaller and more consistent, the better. If you've declared, I am someone who works with focused intensity, your evidence-building action might be setting a timer for just 15 minutes of completely undistracted work. Your environment plays a crucial role in supporting your new productivity identity. Think of it as creating your productivity sanctuary, a space where your new identity can thrive. If you declare, I am someone who works with deep focus, but your phone constantly pings with notifications, there's a mismatch that makes it harder for your brain to believe your new identity. Design your environment to make your desired identity the path of least resistance. This might mean creating a dedicated workspace that triggers your productivity identity as soon as you sit down, or setting up automatic website blockers during your focused work periods. Even wearing specific deep work clothes can signal to your brain it's time to shift into your productive identity. What's fascinating about identity-based productivity is how it eliminates the need for constant decision-making. When you fully embody the identity of someone who prioritizes effectively, you no longer waste mental energy debating whether to check email or work on your most important project first. The decision is automatic because it aligns with who you are. I've seen this transformation happen with countless clients. Take Michael, who went from constantly missing deadlines to becoming known as the most reliable person on his team. His shift wasn't about working longer hours or using fancy productivity systems. It was about changing his identity from I'm always running behind to I am someone who delivers on commitments. His first evidence-building action was completing one small task ahead of deadline each day. Those small wins accumulated, and within weeks, his entire relationship with time had transformed. Meeting deadlines doesn't require heroic effort for Michael anymore. It's simply who he is. What's remarkable is how this shift affected his entire life quality. The confidence he gained from his productivity transformation spilled over into his personal relationships, health habits, and even how he approached leisure time. His productivity sanctuary at work became a template for creating order and intention throughout his life. Consider Alicia, who struggled with chronic procrastination on creative projects. She shifted from I always need pressure to perform to I am someone who creates consistently. Her tiny evidence-building action was writing just 100 words on her novel each morning before checking email. 3 months later, she had completed a full draft, something she'd been trying to do for years. The environmental design supporting her identity was crucial. She created a small writing nook in her home that contained only her notebook and a single pen. This minimalist productivity sanctuary made her new identity the path of least resistance each morning. So here's your challenge. Choose one productivity identity statement that resonates with you. Make it specific to your biggest current struggle. Then identify one tiny action you can take tomorrow that would provide evidence for this new identity. It should be so small that it feels almost trivial. That's how you ensure you'll actually do it consistently. Remember, you're not trying to force yourself to be productive. You're simply becoming someone for whom productivity is natural. So here we are. The secret to breaking bad habits isn't trying harder. It's becoming someone who naturally acts differently. When you truly believe you're a healthy person, choosing vegetables over chips becomes automatic. It's what you do naturally. Your brain constantly seeks alignment between actions and identity. Give it a new identity, and behaviors follow. Start small. Choose one statement, I am someone who, then take one tiny action proving it's true. That single vote for your new self matters tremendously. Choose your identity today. Let your actions affirm who you truly are.